Welcome to Call Your Hits, a Storm Riders Airsoft podcast. Thanks for joining us, everyone. My guest today is Connor Ferrigan, also known as Battle Dwarf. Along with his wife Julie, they own and operate Battle Dwarf Productions, one of the premier Airsoft MILSIM event producers in Canada. Connor's background is extensive, from his time in the Canadian Armed Forces to decades of airsoft and paintball to organizing over 50 different events. Battle Dwarf events provide a consistently unique experience to players, and they ensure that everyone has a really immersive and challenging but fun time. So whether it's a Recce style asymmetrical event or Fallout inspired LARP, Battle Dwarf events have something for everyone. And Battle Dwarf's flagship event, Operation Red Road, is an overnight MILSIM event that features all kinds of special rules, including sub-factions with special mechanics and vehicles, and we'll get into that later on in the show. It's also the favorite event of our good friend Seth and Tony at Flamingo Custom Works, and an event that I myself am hoping to attend this year if the schedules work out. So without further ado, Connor, welcome to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. I appreciate it. What an introduction that was. Wow.
So let's talk about the MILSIM scene in Canada in general. On this show and just in general on social media, we hear so much about the American MILSIM scene. You know, even here in Canada, it seems like everyone knows about MILSIM West and American MILSIM, Desert Fox events, and it all seems so unified in a way with what they call like their national level events. You've been involved in the Canadian scene for a long time, and I know you've met most of the main event runners here. What are some of the main challenges that are involved in reaching the Canadian airsoft audience?
Well, one of the biggest ones right off the bat is population density and overall number of players per capita. So it's just because we're a very large country, we have a lot of people spread out all over the place, and it's really difficult to get a centralized venue in Canada where everybody can be tapped into as part of the target market of airsoft. And as an example, like about 80% of all the big events are taking place in Ontario and in southeastern Ontario more specifically. So it's just really difficult to have really large scale events with a whole bunch of moving parts within the Canadian MILSIM kind of scene. And the other one too, maybe to a lesser extent, depending on who you ask, but it's also the limitation of legalities and availability of infrastructure that we have at our disposal. Like there's some really good fields here in Ontario and even abroad, like even in Alberta too, which I haven't had a chance to look at yet. But there's a lot of good fields out there. It's just we're such a large country, and it's so difficult to get out to some of these other places that are not, basically within this very small area. It's just hard to go and see all of it, basically.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because talking to some of our community members in the United States and certainly in other parts of the world, but especially in the States, like there definitely does seem to be this like culture of travel for airsoft that in my time in playing airsoft, I mean, I've been playing airsoft for almost 20 years now. You haven't seen it as much in Canada either. And I mean, an example of that would be, before I started talking to Seth and Tony at Flamingo, I didn't even know that Battle Dwarf events was a thing. But then when I started reading into them, I'm like, that's really cool. I would love to travel to be able to go to one of these events. And indeed, I'm sure there are many people around the country who probably feel the same way. And it seems like we are not as connected with our airsoft communities as much as perhaps other places are. And I know, like, not to bring up a dead ghost that's long and buried, but when Bill C-21 came around, it seems like the whole airsoft community in Canada came together and was like, okay, yes, we have to fight for this thing. And then once it was gone, everyone sort of returned back to sort of their own pockets of airsoft in the country, which I guess presents an additional challenge for you in trying to tap into as many airsofters as you can as an event promoter, right?
Well, I mean, like to some degree, like I said, like the legality part of it, that whole Bill C-21 thing really kind of unified a lot of people within the sport in a lot of ways. And actually, it actually strengthens the ability of airsoft and the number of things that you could do because they actually finally clearly defined the jewel limits in Canada, which is something that was kind of a gray zone for the longest time. And now it's overall jewels without, you know, while making a velocity and energy as a figure of merit rather than it has to be within this velocity limit and this power limit. So it actually helped Airsoft in a lot of ways for that. But it completely, I don't know. Anyway, a different subject, but with the firearms community, which is related, whether or not people want to admit it or not, but it is kind of related. It really hindered that as well, because a lot of the accessories and a lot of the things that the gun community takes advantage of for their firearms is directly compatible with a lot of the airsoft stuff to a degree. Like obviously, like the aesthetics, the furniture, that kind of thing. So this all has a trickle down effect, but I kind of digressing there a bit. But yeah, it's a little bit difficult now, especially since Bill C-21 can come back at any time, not under that exact name, but it's basically they stuck a pin in it temporarily, and they may revisit it again. So because we don't really have anything clearly defined. We don't have in the states. You're asking how come in the states it's so much more predominant. How come uh, it's so large there compared to Canada? It's because they have they. It's a lot more difficult in the states to just have something completely taken away from you. So people are able to invest in things. Companies are more comfortable with setting up shop. Um, that's why you see a lot of that industry in the states right now. It's because of that very reason. It's more secure. In Canada, it's
Mhm.
not. Things can be taken away in an instant, and we've seen that, and it sucks. And that's why we've seen a lot of businesses, close up shop. Especially during COVID and after COVID, that was a huge hit to a lot of businesses, and airsoft was no exemption whatsoever.
Have you found that, since because I take your point that, things can certainly change, but right now where we are with airsoft in Canada, as you were saying, is actually probably I'm not sure if it's the best position we've been in, but certainly a very secure one in terms of, clarifying around legislation and stuff like that. Since that has happened, have you found that for your events, you've had more participants from different parts of Canada that have been attending? Like what has your cross province attendance looked like in the last little while?
Well, cross province, like other than Ontarians, Quebec has been secondary, of course. Usually that's always been the case. But yeah, like honestly, I haven't really had a whole lot of people from outside of Quebec. I've had a couple people from New Brunswick come out. I think I've had a couple people from Manitoba, but yeah, like not from anyone really from out in BC that will come out and travel. But that's extremely rare too. Like hardly anyone ever comes to Ontario just to play a scenario of airsoft XYZ. But also too, like I don't know what it is. I think like guys joke about this all the time. I'm not the only one, and I'm sure you've probably heard this too. But it just doesn't seem that the Canadian airsoft community is really down for doing any milsims that exceed 24 hours, and even 24 hours is a stretch. I don't know what it is, and it could just be just not being used to it. I don't know. But I personally find that a large portion of the community uh, has this, new expectation. I shouldn't say new, an expectation of the game will wrap up within 18 hours. Like I come Friday night, I sign in, I hang out. I get up at like 8 in the morning. I get my stuff ready. I form up for 11, 12 o'clock. Game kicks off at 1, goes till 8 in the morning. That's usually at the tempo, and then I'm home usually, by no later than 5, in the evening, so I can make it to work on Monday the next day.
Yeah.
Like that seems to be the standard mantra that people expect, and anytime anyone really mentions or tries to put on a plus 24-hour event or even plus 18-hour event, it seems to uh, not bode well for the community, or people will say that they're able to, and then in reality, they can't really do it for whatever reason that may be. A lot of people have different reasons for it, but
For sure.
It is a shame because like people who want to do like the more hardcore stuff, and there is a community of people who want to do that stuff. It's just it's hard. It's so hard to get enough people to do it because you also need to have a large player base that wants to do it en masse in order to have a good Milsim game. Otherwise, it's a low player count scenario game, which they have out west a lot. Like a lot of the Alberta games, they have these 40-hour Milsim games. Not regularly, but they do have them. But they're low player count.
Hmm.
It's really difficult to get high player count ish games in Canada. Full stop, and it is too bad. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to change that. It's hard.
Yeah, and I think this is an interesting point because I mean, we play airsoft in Newfoundland. I'm sure. I mean, if you've listened to any of the episodes that we've done in the past, like our community is quite small, and you can certainly do a lot with a small community. You can host small games, but as an event promoter, it makes it hard when you're only going to sell 40 or 50 tickets or what have you. And it really does speak to something we've discussed on the show before, is that what do airsofters actually want from a milsim? Like you talked yourself about how, like, well, 18 hours plus is probably not what they want. And the vast majority of players, I would say they want milsim, but they don't want a true military experience, right? Like that could involve hours of just watching the same patch of trees or whatever, right? They want verisimilitude of the military experience, but not actually live through the hardship or boredom that comes with it. And I'm curious,
Well,
actually,
yeah.
how
I mean,
how
like,
like
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
how has your time in the CAF informed how you design your games to give players that balance of reality and fun that they're looking for?
Well, I'm glad you asked that because I was about to kind of jump in on you there, but I didn't want to interrupt you because you're basically talking about exactly what I want to talk about. But, the truth of the matter is if I put on a milsim that was actually a military simulation, i.e., a field X, that would be something that CAF members could relate to all too well, especially combat arms guys. People would hate it. It's not a good time. It's not a good time. Like the only time you do have a fun time is when you're with your boys and you're suffering together and you're making do because like you're joking around. When you have the time and ability to do so. But overall, the big picture of a mill sim, it's not going to be a good time. You know, and it's gonna suck. And people say, "Yeah, that's what I want." Well, until they actually get a taste for it, you may say you want to do it once, but the thing is unlike the military, you can't force people to do something or be there for a certain amount
Hmm.
of time. Military, like, you don't show up on time, you're AWOL. You don't do something that you're supposed to do, you're not following a direct order or you're insubordinate, and there's charges and consequences for this. You can't do that or simulate that in airsoft, and you don't want to yell at people and cuss them out and dress them down and give them corrective measures at an airsoft game because the truth of the matter is unless you've actually kind of been indoctrinated in the system for a amount of time, you're not in that headspace to take that mentally. Most people. I'm
Hmm.
not saying not everyone. A lot of people can't, but like a lot of people can't, and you don't know who those people are. And if you were to actually simulate to that extent, it would suck for the vast majority of people. I know a lot of people are going to say, "Well, I could do it." Like I'm sure probably a lot of people could do it. It's just that have those people who say you could do it. Have you been put? I'm not talking about CAF members. I'm talking about people that are just civilians. Have you been
Hmm.
put in an environment like that before? Yes or no? If the truth of, and if the truthful answer is no, you don't know if you can handle that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
Now, what better place to figure that out than a controlled airsoft environment where the consequences aren't going to be as dire, right? Because like even in training, uh, like people die at the fair, as they say in a million ways to die in the West. Is
Hmm.
people can get hurt, injured, or killed in training. That does happen. So you can't really simulate things and go to the full extent. As much as people like to think that they can or actually want that, it's hard to do that. So if I did put on something like that, it probably wouldn't do well. That's the truth of the matter. And
Yeah.
MILSIM West is a good example of something that people can relate to as being hardcore. If anyone knows the format, I think you know the format too, right? It's basically
Hmm.
like you're rucking in 8 kilometers. I believe it's 8 kilometers, or was it 6 miles or something like that? That's about 8 kilometers or so. You're rucking in. You have to carry what's on your back and only what you can carry in with you. If you fall out, you have these guys cadre. You're basically your safety staff that follow you in to whatever your rendezvous point is, and then you're essentially going to link up with the rest of your guys. Uh, and let's be honest, a lot of guys can't do an 8K ruck with all the stuff on their back. Like a 60-pound ruck is probably realistic for 72 hour sustainment with ammo, with guns, with food and water and everything else. That's going to be a 60 to 80 pound ruck in reality. Uh, a lot of people won't be able to do that. A lot of people can, especially if you train for it. But if you just went in there completely without any sort of workup training, a lot of people wouldn't be able to do that. So how hardcore can you really go? And actually sell tickets. That's the thing. You know.
Yeah, and so how have you balanced that in your events? Because I looked to your rule set for Red Road, and like there's a fair amount of simulation involved in that, but not so much to the point of like the 8K ruck march with your 60-pound kit and like all this kind of stuff. Where do you strike that balance?
Um, Trial and error. So we've done 2 events for Red Roads, and we've done 2 events which is kind of related to that, which is kind of a recce simulator. Which with that one, people either absolutely loved it or they absolutely hated it. There was no in between with that one.
Hmm.
Um, the Flamingo guys that you were referring to, like they loved it. They did actually very well at it. Um, but a lot of people did not like it at all. It was. I want to say that was probably one of the more hardcore ones that I think anyone could probably do, um, just because of the difficulty level of it. But yeah, it's hard to strike that balance right because it's until like you actually subject people to it and actually get some data collected from those people. It's hard to gauge it. But that being said, I played a lot of airsoft over the years. I played a lot of milsims, quote unquote milsims, at in the Ontario scene. Played a lot of force recon events and nightfalls and stuff like that. Um, you know, and I'll tell you from what I've seen, people aren't really able to do any more than 18 hours, and even 18 hours for a lot of people, almost the majority. That's even a stretch for a lot of them.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, in particular, I'm curious, like, what are some things that you did at like that Reki game, for example, that on paper you thought was going to be good, but when it actually met the road, like, did not really work out for your players?
Well, it did work out for people who were switched on with it. Um, and so we had the way the format that one was broken down to is it was small elements or sections that were simulated as recce sections, so no more than 11 people in a section, broken down into fire teams, of 2 or 3 as well. And they were all against each other. So each small team were all against each other. But they all had a common objective, which was rolled out by NPCs. So they all had the same objective. They had to do the same mission, but they had different starting points, different infill times, but they had to observe and uh, give an acronym called Salutum, which is a Reiki term to basically relay and indicate an observed activity, enemy activity. Um, so they had to give all that, and they had to do it in a certain amount of time, and it was pass or fail. It's either you get the points or you don't. Um, and if you accidentally get bumped into a different, wrecking unit, they're considered enemy, and so you have to engage that. So it kind of gave you a choice. You could either choose to avoid them altogether and be stealth and do recce, which is reconnaissance, You know, you go
Hmm.
like the glorified more than what the job really truly is all about from the meat and potatoes of it, which is reconnaissance. Uh, or you could engage them. So you had that choice, you know. And it was interesting to see how many people chose to do different things in different ways. And I was kind of impressed with a lot of people that were doing that. We also had a freak phenomena occur where we actually had all the GPS and all the satellite data completely get scrambled to the point where you couldn't use any of it. Even my
Wow.
mechanical compass wasn't working right. Yeah, yeah. Is unreal. I've never even I've heard about this before. I've never seen it in reality, but there was some sort of electromagnetic storm up above, and I found about it like 2 days afterwards because like even the mechanical compass wasn't working. It was like spinning like a Bermuda Triangle situation. The GPS data was completely off by sometimes 50, 60 meters plus, or just like even on the GPS, like the bearing indicator was just doing this unreal stuff, and it
Jeez.
was because of an electrical storm. It completely knocked out all this stuff, um, which is
Just lucky,
wild.
I guess, that time, hey?
Well, it was over the course of a 3-day period, and it started to it was intense at first and then lessened. But the moral of the story is that like even with redundancies, you still had a lot of issues, and people were having a hard time finding their points because they did have 8-figure grids that they had to go to, and a lot of them knew how to do a bit of nav, and I was kind of coaching them through how to do all these things, and yeah, it was crazy. It was crazy in that sense because nothing worked right, like as far as the navigation equipment goes, and people still made it work though. So good
Hmm.
on them for that. But yeah, like in short to answer your question, it's it is difficult because people want to do some hardcore stuff, but whether or not people actually want to do that, it would be interesting. And a really interesting kind of litmus test for this is going to be coming up where these event organizers out of Alberta through I believe it's MILSIM Canada, they're putting on a 40-hour event at the compound in Minden, and that'll be interesting because no one has really actually pushed the button on a 40-hour before.
Hmm.
So whether or not that's going to work out, we'll see. I wish them all the best. Um, it will be interesting to see. That's all I'll say. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah. So I want to talk about red roads in particular. As I mentioned, I was looking through the rule set. You have like a lot of I think you call them crazy rules, but like sub factions for impressions and um you know when I was looking at it, it seems like some of it could be disjointed. Like you have one team can like they can do an impression of like Aussie Outback Commandos, or then they could do like US Airborne, and like you can have all these different elements playing at the same time. How did you get the idea to be able to incorporate all of that sort of together in one event?
Um, I kind of borrowed a lot of those concepts from a lot of the World War II reenactors because they'll have and I mean, I'm not by any means in that community, with 2 feet by any means, but I know how it goes, and I kind of sort of got to see a lot of it, and I like the fact that, a lot of these LARP events that use like blank fire guns and that kind of stuff, and they're not actually shooting BBs most of the time. Sometimes they do nowadays, just because of how prolific airsoft has gotten. But a lot of the older school ones, where it's all blank fire stuff, you would have factions like, let's say if you were a part of like the French forces, you would have partisan units, like it would be civilians, with arms, and like, or you would have the U.S. Airborne, or you would have, like one of like the Wehrmacht units from like Germany and that kind of stuff. So you had all these different factions that you could choose from uh, to go into it. And a lot of these guys, they don't take it like competitively seriously, right? Like it's more like a hangout session, and people get right into like the LARP element of it, right? But I think it's kind of neat how people can, at least be given like the choice to try a lot of like the reenacted stuff that they have, or kind of fall into those kind of roles. I find that it helps facilitate people to get more immersed into that environment than just say you're on team red, you're on team blue, and there's a mission and have at it. I think it just kind of draws you in more, and a lot of the sub factions that I had too would also have their own special, unique perks or abilities that no one else could have. So it also furthers that kind of immersiveness of I'm this guy and I'm this unit and I get to do this really cool thing that no one else can do. So uh,
Yeah, it gives you a motivation to build that impression kit if that perk is something you indeed want to do. Like if I remember correctly, like the Aussie Outback Commandos, they can use SMGs. They're the only ones who can. So if
that's
you
right.
want to use an SMG, well then there's a motivation for you to dress Aussie, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like, if you're not really down with like dressing up as like Aussies and stuff like that, I get it. But I mean, like, it's not hard to do, and it like really like no one's asking you to, put on like a heavy Australian accent if you really don't want to. But
Yeah.
I did tell people though, like, if you in order to take advantage of those perks, you have to at least make a concerted attempt to look the part at a minimum. And a lot of people did. Like, to their credit, at that event, there was a lot of really good impression kits at it, and I thought that was kind of neat to see. People told me too that they liked it too, so I mean, like, that's a good sign to hear from a lot of people that they like to see that kind of stuff as well. Um, but yeah, like there's a lot of things that I probably wouldn't do for Red Road 3 um, coming up and at an unknown time and date as of the time of this recording yet that I'm willing to disclose yet. Uh, but when it does happen, I'm going to probably keep the sub factions, but I'm going to make a couple tweaks. I think for the better, just from the feedback that I get, and from the experiences that other players had, and from what I observed too on the ground. Yeah.
I know that vehicles are also a big part of Red Roads, and you have very detailed vehicle rules involved. I wonder how much of your time in the CAF, perhaps spent in the lab, has informed your decision to make very detailed vehicle combat rules.
Well, I mean, like it. If you really look at it, it's pretty rudimentary. Like like if you get hit in the front, you're gonna do a lot less damage than if you get hit in the side. Like versus the rear. Like if you spend any time playing any like video games that involve tanks, I mean, like you kind of get the concept too, right? Like I'm gonna cause more effect if I hit this thing, in the side, or like I can immobilize it easier from shooting this vehicle in the side versus the front, which is where generally armored vehicles where the majority of the armor is in the front. Uh, but I mean, yeah, I mean, like it borrows mostly from like video games than really in the cap, because the reality is like if there was an actual like Lab 6 rolling down and like you wanted to disable it from the front, like you need something fairly substantial to take that thing out and cause substantial damage. At probably at bare minimum you would need some sort of ATGM, or you'd need a tank round at a minimum,
Yeah.
to actually take that out from the front. So I mean, like an M203, which is like kind of the prolific anti-tank round now in airsoft. Shooting the tagging rounds, that's kind of the go-to standard now.
Hmm.
That would do pretty much nothing to an armored fighting vehicle of that size. But we only have vehicles and trucks at our disposal. No one has an actual like tank-looking thing right now
Yeah.
that I'm aware of. Who knows? Maybe someday. But yeah, I mean, like the rule sets are designed to be fun, but if anything, it forces you to try and maneuver better and not just YOLO a shot out to 100 meters and just make a hit. Like you want to try and get that rear shot so that you actually take the thing out in a single shot kind of thing. So
Yeah. How do you uh, how do you keep this fun for as many people as possible, but also give those, because you were mentioning before, and I think that's a really great point. Like you have people who want to test themselves, right? They don't know what they're actually capable of. They say, "Oh, I can totally do that." But to your point, unless you've been in that situation, you have no idea, right? So how do you give the opportunity to those people to actually try and push themselves while also having an event that can be just more, let's call it more easily accessible for your larger player base?
well, it's I mean, just in the way you frame that question, though, it's like how can you be tested without going all the way? And I mean, like it's hard because I mean, how do you really know what your limits are unless you actually hit the wall? And I mean, like by hitting the wall, that also means an element of risk and danger. So if you want to kind of pad everything in bubble wrap, which is what most airsoft games are, uh, it's really difficult to know like where your limits are, except with the exception of maybe endurance and stamina for that. And you know what? The best way to increase that is to be fit. Like to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest, you know. Uh, I I mean like I am not quite as fit as I used to be because you know I've been out for a bit, but like it helps. It helps just being fit. It helps. And let's be honest, a lot of people who play airsoft are not fit, but that's okay because airsoft is supposed to be inclusive and fun for everybody.
Hmm.
You know, and so like you want to still have those people be able to come out and play, and that's why like I don't know right now, and I don't know, and so like just pay for what it is. I don't know if like a Milsim West style event where you have to ruck in all your equipment would really be successful at this time, but I could be wrong. It'd be
Hmm.
interesting to see. That's what I mean. Like, you know, it'd be nice to collect some data first and kind of see. Uh, and also like the venue too. Like, where would we do that? Because like we're very limited and we don't have an abandoned base like they do in the states to actually go and play these games at. Like in the states, they actually have a full size abandoned base that's fairly well intact. That you know they can have these 72-hour events at. You know where people are sleeping out, like doing urban ops, and they're doing you know like urban hides and all this kind of stuff inside of an army base while it's you know adjacent to another active army base. So you get the ambiance, the helicopters, the live fire training right beside it, and everything else, and it just adds to it. You know, we don't really have a whole lot of that at our disposal here. It's too
Hmm.
bad. You know, too bad. But generally, we like to keep our army bases active and not not just like left out. But yeah, it's just it is what it is, right? I would love to put on a 40-hour event though. Don't get me wrong. It just I gotta see that people are willing to actually you know do their part and sign up for them because I don't like having to chase people down for signups. I don't know how it is like for you guys out there in Newfoundland having to chase down like people to sign up and reminders and that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I don't like doing that. Right? I don't like chasing people down for signups. Like, hey, you know how you said like you pledged to come do this? Are you still available? I hate doing it.
Yeah.
I hate it. You know,
Yeah. It's yeah.
like
Yeah.
Milsim West guys, like they don't have that problem because they throw it up there, and the only problem that they have is how they're gonna like what time they're gonna sell out at. You know.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that comes back to the population that you were talking about at the start and like how many people are available and then indeed how many people are interested. Here, I mean, it for us it's kind of different because it's so novel. Like I'm hosting like a 10-hour like hardcore milsim that's milsim West inspired with like the rucking in and all this kind of stuff. But our community has never experienced anything other than like a 5-hour skirmish, right? So
Okay.
like a 10-hour continuous event is a big deal. And it speaks to sort of what you were talking about earlier that like in order to have people be able to come to 40-hour events, right? You have to have people who are able to come to 24-hour events. And in order for them to be able to come to 24-hour events, like there's a progression, right?
There's a
Because
workup to
right?
it, and also too like it's not like the military where you know where we can do like week long field axes. But the thing is those guys are also getting paid full time to be there.
Yeah.
That's their
Yeah.
job. And so like they don't have to take time off work to be there because that is their work. They're getting
Yeah.
paid to be there. You know,
Yeah.
if people were being paid to play airsoft and they didn't have a, you know, 40-hour work week to, you know, reschedule around, you know, like months and months in advance, I'm sure it'd be way easier to do that, you know? Um,
Yeah.
but like there's again it comes in population density and there's more people in the US full stop and a lot of those people have more ability to take time off work simply because of the numbers there's more people and the more people there is the more people that have free time to do that stuff right
Yeah,
so
and there's that airsofter maturity, right? That like experience level. Because like there are guys like yourself or like some people on my team who you've done a career in the CAF or you understand what a field exercise looks like. You know your own limits and what you need to pack and stuff. And for this event that we're hosting later on this year, like they don't know what to pack. Like we're telling them it's like, hey, we're gonna be in the woods. There's no cell service. You're gonna need a radio and you're gonna need a whistle. And they're like, oh my God, a whistle? It's like, yeah, like you're gonna need a compass, you're gonna like all this kind of stuff. So to your point, like I think there's also that that maturity and the availability of having a player base, to be to your point earlier. It's like, when is this going to sell out versus, hey, I'm looking for 40 people, like I need you to sign up, and so on. And I wonder how much that gets helped by trying to broaden that Airsoft Canada, right, community, as opposed to always looking for players in the same areas. Like, how might you look at, for example, promoting red roads? I'm just using this as an example, right? But like promoting red roads in different provinces to get people to travel to come to your event. What would that look like?
Well, I've tried um, uh, quite extensively. It's just like think of it this way: like you live in Alberta or live in BC, and you have games that go on in Alberta and BC. They may not be the largest, but you got games that are going on. It's a 2 hour drive to get to one of those for them, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a 2.5 to 3 day trek to come out to one over here. And then the same time you take to spend driving to it, you have to also come back. So imagine this: you're literally taking a full week off work to come out to Ontario from BC to come do a MILSIM of any substantial amount of time. That's a big commitment. You know what I mean? It's a
Yeah,
big
it's a
commitment.
once a year kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and like whereas in the states, like you hold one near, like let's say as a perfect example, like Pennsylvania, you're getting like the New York crowd guys, which is very high population density. You're getting like Massachusetts, you're getting Maine, you're getting all the surrounding states in that area. You know, let's say you hold one out in California, very high population density out in that area. In Texas, you're getting a very high population density of people in that area. uh, it's more doable in those places because even for them, the travel distance is like a day. You know, for any of those major cities, it's like a day at most. At the most, it's like a day. So it's easier to achieve for them. We're just the country's really big. The country's really
Yes.
big. We got a lot of land to cover to get to places, and you guys have to take a ferry all the way, and you got to go
Oh,
through
we're
Quebec.
gonna fly. We're not driving. We're flying. We're flying into
Yeah.
Toronto, and we're gonna drive to wherever it is in Ontario. Like that's what's gonna happen. But I think there's a piece to, sort of, one of the things I've really learned through our Discord community is like normalizing the idea of traveling for airsoft. I think it's obviously it's budget dependent and all this kind of stuff, but I feel like if we have these events that are like these pillars, like you do a 40-hour mil sim or you do whatever that looks like, you know, it's a build it and they will come situation potentially. We do have those same challenges in Canada, but I feel like like in speaking with you and like some of the other organizers, I'm sure maybe there's something there, right? Like maybe there's a way, and like, or even getting people from the states to come up to Canada for an event like that. Wouldn't that be crazy, right?
Well, I used to put out feelers too there as well. Like I'm on all like the American Milsim Facebook groups too. I don't know if you've ever seen like what those are like, but I mean it's very different than the way how we do things.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are switching over to Discord too, so now we're in like this transitional period now with like airsofters, and like, I think a lot of groups too are starting to slowly kind of go to Discord for a lot of their event organization now. And so like we're in like this transitional phase now where half the people prefer Facebook and half the people prefer Discord to manage, and that's not really helping either. I just wish everyone would just jump on one or the other just to make it so much easier.
Yeah.
Now like everyone's having to advertise on Instagram, on Facebook, on Discord, and now there's threads, and then it's a lot, and it's a lot of work just to kind of get the word out. But yeah, I put out feelers in the states, and a lot of the guys are just like, "Hey, you're from Canada, stop posting here." And like, I'm not being obnoxious. I'll like post like one thing, maybe like a month, maybe. It's just like, "Hey, you're from Canada, stop posting." Like, okay, that's fine. No one's gonna come out to a Canadian game. Who wants to come out to Canadian Milsim? Don't you guys all have to have those stupid orange tips? And like, I'm thinking to myself, don't they? Like,
Yeah, seriously,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, don't you know we don't? It's actually
Mm,
against the law, at least for importation. Like it's just
yeah.
and all of them, they don't know, and honestly, like they also don't care. They don't, because they already have their things set up there. You know, uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
like those guys who do the traveling, like those like novice kind of characters, and you know, like they do that because that's part of their work and they're influencers, and they actually get paid for doing that because it's content, and what pays the bills for them is the content, not coming out to the MILSIM games.
Yeah,
Very few
certainly.
people are in that position.
Yeah, certainly there's not a huge, I think, traveling airsoft community, but I know that for, if we look at our Discord, like we have people who've traveled from the States and from Canada to go to attend games in New Zealand. Some of us are traveling to Europe for games, later this year in the summer. So I think, there is the potential there. I mean, it's not going to sell out your ticket base, put it that way. But I'm curious to see, sort of, as a result of us having this conversation today, and like sort of thinking about especially Red Road, which I am very much looking forward to. I think that from an event concept, like that is something that I absolutely want to travel for, because I think it's like it's different. It's at, well, I don't know where it's going to be this year, but I know where you held it last year, if I'm not mistaken, was the compound, right?
That's right. Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
which is a phenomenal location based on everything that I've seen. So like, you combine sort of the rule set and the vibe that you're putting out there with the people and the accessibility of that location. I mean, if Red Rose 3 is anything like that, and I understand that we don't know where it's going to happen yet, but that's going to make for a crazy experience too, right?
It will. Yeah. I mean, like the first Red Road. I don't know if you knew about that one, but we held that at a non-paintball or airsoft field. It was at a place called Storyland, very close to where I live now, and it's known as a historical site because that's where Champlain stood to find out where he wanted to put Fort Cologne at the time. But anyway, it was a children's kind of like story time kind of walkthrough with animatronics, like animals and all that kind of stuff. And anyway, it was like a kid kind of like playground kind of thing. But anyway, it was since turned into like a glamping villa, like just like a bunch of tents and everything. Um, and it was completely overgrown. Like I got a really good rate on it, and it's a really good place to have a game like that. It's just you can die so easily there. Like there are like deadfall cliffs where like you could one wrong step at night and like you're done. That's it. Game over. There's no coming back from it. Like there was a lake feature that went through the center of it, and with all your kit on, you're gonna sink like a rock, and it's an 80-foot depth at the bottom of that lake. And even with me at the briefing, I can make fun of this so much, but like because they hate my long briefings. But there's a reason for it. Is because these are dangerous. At least that first one was very dangerous, and people still tried to cross that river by means of a beaver dam, and I had to shut that down too. But it's unreal. Like all like one wrong step, and that guy probably would have gone into the drink, and there'd be no way to get him off unless he was smart enough to rip his stuff off as he's sinking to the bottom of this lake. Yeah, so like I don't want to have these events at these crazy dangerous places because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, was it an amazing event? Yes, it was highly successful, and people were still talking about it today. But it is a miracle that no one got seriously hurt. Like the worst was a sprained ankle, and that was it. But it's a miracle, honest to God, miracle that no one got seriously hurt at it. But also, that's part of the appeal to a lot of people. Like, oh, we almost died doing this. Yeah, but from an insurance standpoint.
Yeah, seriously, makes for a
Yeah.
great story if you survive, right?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, it's yeah. It's fun to talk
Yeah.
about if you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about Red Roads for like Red Roads 2 and Red Roads 3? Again, no, we don't know where it's gonna be, but like what is the main sort of like gameplay of this event going to look like? Like what's the plan for, like, when you show up, what are you gonna be doing?
So with this one, I do want to have a little bit more of a hardcore kind of infill. So it will be one of the major rules that I'm dead set on. I don't even mind giving it up right now. Might as well do it here. But uh, you will have to use only what you can carry on your back. And that's just how it is. If you go to your car even once, even for whatever, then you're effectively removing yourself from the game. So there's going to be that. So yes, this will not be for everyone. This will be for people who want to do this kind of thing. Will it be like the real thing? It will be as close as it can be without taking an exorbitant amount of risk. So the answer to that. But yes, it will be more hardcore. You will have to only go in with what you can carry on your back, and uh, it, it'll be more realistic than I think anything else I've done before. The question is, are people going to sign up for it, and are people going to show up for it, and are people going to stay the whole thing? Uh, we'll see. I'm basically going to spaghetti on the wallet and see. I'm going to have a sign up time and a hard shutdown time, and if people don't sign up, I'll just cancel it. But that's basically how I'm going to run it. Because I don't want to chase people down for
Hmm.
signups. It's annoying. Like people either want to go or they don't want to go. But that's how I'm going to run it. And the location, um, when I do get it, it will be insane. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to be insane when I get this location. The only issue is that I can't say when it's going to be because they tell me when it's going to be. That's the truth. The truth of the matter is they tell me, and in this particular case, and it's hard to organize things like that. But there will be adequate notice. There'll be at least 4 months notice if it's going to happen, like at a timing. It's just yeah, it's just one of those issues. Right? Trust me, I would love to give as much notice as possible and tell you
Yeah.
all about it and where it's going to be in the topography, but I don't want to get people's hopes up because I don't know when it's going to be yet. You know.
And that makes total sense. I think we looked at like when we went to look to AMS Iron Horse in 2024. We were fully expecting it to be in like January, February, because that's when they've historically it had been. And the facility, the Guardian Training Center in Perry, Georgia, was like, nope, we have government contracts. Sorry, you're gonna have to come in June instead.
Yeah, that's
And
a big
AMS had no
problem.
choice,
That's a
right?
big problem. Yeah, so like any of those military bases, the civilian exercises or civilian run activities are always going to be secondary
Yeah,
to actual training. But
yeah,
it sucks from a organizational standpoint to have to contend with that because they can literally come in like the day before while people are tended out, ready to go, and be like, "Yeah, we need this. Sorry," and that's the end of it. Like you know what I mean? Like people fly down, people drive down, and be like, "Yeah, sorry, we need this."
yeah.
Now that being
It's
said, if I was gonna run one at something like that hypothetically in Minecraft, that would not happen. It would be mitigated, and I'd have guarantees in place
yeah,
for that.
certainly.
But you know what I mean? Like they can give you like a week's notice and be like, "Yeah, sorry," you know.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, yeah. That's not just Canada. That's the U.S. too. Like they boot you off. That's why like they kind of are spoiled in a way because they have a condemned army base that they're playing at. It's condemned. No one's going to use it, and so therefore they're safe to use it, right? So
Mhm.
that's why like they're kind of spoiled in that way. Yeah.
Yeah. So in any event, I think whenever Red Road 3 actually decides to, happens, we're, firstly, perfectly happy to talk about this on the show and say, okay, where and when it's going to be. And, we'll talk about it. I think we'll bring it up in the community and we'll share it because I think this is definitely something that I will want as many people as possible from around the country and surely other places too to experience, right? Because our friends like Sed and Tony have talked about it, so highly, right? In terms of the game design, in terms of sort of the involvement and all this kind of stuff, and how much fun it is to be part of those events. So, in any event, I'm really excited to be able to talk about the specifics of it whenever they come out. But yeah, I think it's what you're doing, like all the things that I've heard and read and we talked about. I mean, it's so interesting, right? And you're totally right that the population center of Canada is southeastern Ontario, and that's where you're going to have most of the stuff. Um, I hope we get to a point where more people around the country are willing to start traveling to hit some of these events that are so unique. Like I think about your Fallout LARP that you had many years ago.
Oh
Like
yeah,
was
that
was
was
it
a
Fallout
while
like
ago. Yeah, yeah,
New
yeah.
Ottawa? Is that what it was called?
Yeah, yeah, that was a good time. I miss doing those. Yeah, because like a lot of the guys on our team, the team I was on at the time that I started was called the Honey Badgers, and we started that in uh, a while ago. Wow, it was like 2011, 2012. So we started that team, and they were all turbo nerds. You know what I mean? Like all of them. So like all of them are down for doing like these LARP style, like Fallout New Vegas style airsoft games, and it was a riot. There's guys who showed up in power armor, like an actual power armor suit, and it was insane. It was just insane. It was a good time. There was a gambling mechanic, and that was a 12-hour event. And people said, "Oh, I wish it was a 24. I wanted to I don't want to leave this place." It's like
Yeah.
we decked it out. It was at a place called Red Devils at the time, which is unfortunately no longer open anymore. But yeah, that was a really good venue, and it was a really awesome event at the time. Yeah, I think like fall's kind of like fallen off lately, So I don't know how well it'd do today, but I'm sure there'd be some people that want.
Well, I mean, they've got that new Fallout TV show, so maybe people would lose their
Yeah,
mind for it again, right?
yeah, true enough. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
listen, Connor, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with me and talk about sort of your experience running MILSIMs in Canada. And really looking forward to hearing more about Red Rose 3. I think, like I said, I can't wait to attend. If the schedules align, which fingers crossed that they do, but I really, really am looking forward to that. So, yeah, thanks so much for being on, man.
No, I appreciate that, and that's amazing how they got people that are actually willing to travel out to the event. So it keeps me optimistic that there might be hope yet. So that's good.
Yeah, I don't know if we'll get like a full squad, but maybe half a dozen for sure. So,
Yeah, for sure. Just the fact that like you were saying that yeah, we might be able to come on out, like that's just by saying that it gives me hope that maybe we might be able to try some guys out from afar.
yeah, my Aeroplan points are set aside. We're good to
Yeah,
go. So,
yeah,
all
yeah, yeah. True enough. Yeah, yeah. Good stuff.
right. Well, thanks to everyone for listening. That's all we've got for you this week. We'll talk to you next week. Take care.
Thanks. Have a good one.